What do you recommend for CPG brands, right? We talked about coffee, energy drinks. I think one of the downsides is just the COGS or the upfront cost of producing the energy drink, producing the coffee, and shipping it. I mean, how do you recommend that entrepreneurs or brands manage that? Obviously, that just cuts into your margin. For example, if you're selling an info product, a course, a software application that has no cost of replication, there is no marginal cost, and there's a big marginal cost of CPG. So what are your strategies for managing that and scaling a brand where you have to pay for inventory in every energy drink that you produce, for example?
Yeah, finding a good partner when you're sourcing this is crucial. And I have a couple that I work with that are great. So to some degree, you need to start and understand your margins, understand where you're going to test within your margins even. So it's, let's say, flavor formulations, right? Or certain formulations you want to test into. Your co-packers, your drop shipping, where you're shipping to. So some of the strategies. In a particular business partner of mine, he is a co-owner of a beverage company. They right now, to order to kind of, I would say, not say cut down on cost per se, but I'll give one, like, I think crucial example is shipping beverage, and we'll use beverage. Shipping beverage is a pain in so many ways and for so many reasons, not least of which it's expensive. It can also break, right? So there's a lot of like exploding cans that can happen. How do you make sure that you aren't just sending something like shipping beverage to California if your co-packer is somewhere else, or your inventory is, let's say, in New Jersey? That is going to cost a lot. So I typically like to have brands start in a way where shipping isn't going to hurt them, and shipping ends up being the worst offender usually. Maybe sourcing your cans, there's a lot of worse offenders, but shipping is certainly one of those. So the easiest one to do is start regionally and start your market regionally in a way that makes sense. So maybe you're only just East Coast, or maybe you're only east of the Mississippi. There are certain ways you can absolutely do that and target so that you aren't eating the cost on shipping. And that's like first and foremost. Then even on kind of formulation, right? That's another one. I tend to advise brands to start with a higher price point and figure out a way down versus starting lower and then working your way up. It's really hard to convince consumers to buy a product that they were buying at X dollars and then it's a 30% increase because the margins just weren't there. Another good example is tea. Certain blends can be very expensive to do. And so consumers don't realize that it is costly and the margins can be slim. I recommend all these cutting down costs where you can. I think operating at a 60 to 70% margin is usually good. I have brands that operate at 30, but now all of a sudden that gets in a much scarier position. If you can find a way to cut costs, whether it's on formulation, whether it's on ingredients, whether it's on shipping, whether it's on packing, whether it's on labeling, whether it's on even legal, something that you can do within that to test into your market to make sure that you aren't, always breaking even no matter what you do. I think shipping is a good one. And I think finding good partners that I can recommend, usually in the beverage side, that makes sense. Yes, very often it's going to be difficult with your margins if you don't understand them immediately, because I've had a lot of brands quickly, like shipping ice cream is almost not always, shipping frozen is almost unprofitable from the get-go, no matter what you do. Like that's just one as an example. Whether it's shipping, you have to have dry ice, etc. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. So usually the first and foremost, if you have a DTC business, my recommendation is try to find ways to ship and get your product regional so that you aren't, having to spend $15 to ship your product.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Is there a specific area of CPG that tends to have a lot higher margins, or what is like the highest margin product, right? I know top of mind like perfume. I know that that's very high margin.
Yeah, makeup and beauty can have very high margins. They can have very high margins. I would say that in the CPG space, I've seen, which is why you saw, I would say, a resurgence or a lot of growth in a lot of, certainly on the female entrepreneur side, but male too, that started their own beauty brand. Beauty at scale can be great on margins. We're talking, 90% margins. Perfume, like cologne, is another one. I think you make some good points. I'm surprised that there are more beverage, because it's harder to get the margins there. It's easier at scale, right? So some of these also are better at scale. Beverage is better at scale. Fashion is certainly better at scale. Furniture, right? Furniture, home goods is better at scale. Those are but if you can get it within beauty and you can make it work, and I've worked with brands that are male skincare, for example. If somebody can unlock that, it is great. There are great margins there, but it's also something that is untapped. So beauty, usually beauty products, but I will sort of caveat that, Connor, because since COVID lockdowns, and since all of that, a lot of the supplies have gotten more costly. So even beauty that used to be 90%, because of some of these ingredients and formulations and making sure that it's compliant, not testing on animals, all of these start to add up right on costs. And so it used to be a 90% margin, has probably dwindled as far as I've seen, and especially when you want to get interesting in terms of your formulations, those have also dwindled as well. But I would say that would be one. Usually I have seen snacking be pretty decent, right? Like kind of like your chips, your protein bars have been pretty decent. But even then, the sourcing on all of this has gone way up. So the whole game has changed. I think this has hurt DTC businesses to some degree, just being able to get kind of the ingredients that they used to be able to get. They're a lot more costly. There are more tariffs. And all of these things, the formulations have gone up too. So the margins have gotten thinner. And I think if you've seen this or read about it, there is certainly a difficulty in CPG now, and I'd say even more broadly DTC, to being able to make these margins work in your favor, and then certainly being able to do them. So, and then quick corollary too is even in something like cleaning, which had decent margins. You know, I was at Clorox and worked with Clorox for years. Cleaning is good at scale, but if you're starting something new, you want to be BPA free. You want all these other things that normally consumers are now looking for. Those eat away at your margins. They eat away pretty substantially at the margins. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it in this context. Usually you got that market segment, and then this is why price points are also up. So the ingredients in usually within beauty were pretty simple. Even on perfumes were pretty simple, but then you have to have scale. And now because of those bit players, which I think you're alluding to as well, the smaller ones, the ones that are coming in and taking margin or market share, it's harder for them to be profitable, but then also difficulty at scale to be able to do it efficiently, even within those segments that I mentioned that were once high margin.